What's up, Doc? Welcome to the Docs Get Money podcast. Are you a badass doctor killing it professionally and has bigger dreams than just clocking in and out of the hospital? Do you want to leave behind a legacy that is as lit as an HBCU homecoming? Want to know how other doctors are getting to the big bag? That's right, making 5, 6, and 7 figures without putting on the white coat? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Kimberly, but you can call me Kim or KB. I went from being a burnt out and overwhelmed emergency physician to the founder and CEO of 2 6-figure non-clinical companies and beating burnout along the way. I'm also your business coach, here to help you make money moves to change the world. This podcast isn't just about making money, though. It's about leveling up your life, mindset, and bank account so you can build an empire that's as iconic as Beyonce. You ready? Let's get into it.
All right. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Okay. Well, cheers to that. Cheers to my birthday.
Salud. Salud.
Salute. Okay. You know what? First things first. Let's start off with who you are.
Hi.
And tell me your pronouns, how you like to be addressed, and what you do.
Well, hi, everybody who may be watching or listening to this whenever you watch or listen to it. My name is Daa'iyah, she, her, Daa'iyah Cooper. I am a recovering ER doctor. I am a physician, of course. I've trained and double boarded in emergency medicine and internal medicine, but I worked in emergency medicine for many years up until just a month ago, where I left my academic job, where I also was the simulation director for the department, to focus on me and my transition into focusing more on my real estate business. I'm a real estate investor, an educator, and a mentor.
Wow. Okay, so a couple of things. I know, clearly, of course, I know that we're both in emergency medicine, but I don't remember the first time I met you. Did we meet?
I think we met with my girl, bless up, Tolu, probably at ASAP.
Yes. Okay. So for anyone that's watching, Tolu Odufuye, MD, is a friend of both of ours who we lost entirely too soon last year. Tolu was extraordinarily bright.
A whole vibe.
A whole vibe. It's so difficult to put into words what Tolu means to us, but Tolu was an emergency physician, also a woman of color, like I said, who passed away last year in 2021, and we lost her too soon. She was very active in the physician community, advocating for other... advocate of other young Black women and men going into emergency medicine and becoming amazing physicians. Like she was a mentor. She advocated for policy on the state and the federal level to impact physicians, and not to fill in her story too much of her, but she suffered through a lot of difficult things in her life that you would not have known by just looking at her. And I believe she handled it with grace, and she handled it with the best way that she knew how to while she was here. So I'm so glad you brought her name up.
Yeah, you know how much a ball of fun she was. She was dragging me around to all the parties and stuff. That's probably how we met. I don't know exactly where, but that's probably how we went. And it's so funny. I met her as a student. We were medical students. We didn't even know we were going to be ER doctors yet. And I was at a SNMA event, like in Ohio. We were in Ohio. And she just walked up to me and just talking. That's just her personality. So every time I think about that, it's just like, it's an example of the type of person she is. She's always like linking people, not shy, or type of person she was. So yeah, it's good memory that brings up.
Yes. So we miss you, Tolu, completely. So yeah, she probably did introduce us at some point. So, okay, so you said that you met Tolu at SNMA. I know I've done SNMA at Ross, where I went to medical school in the Caribbean. Where did you go to medical school?
Oh yeah, I forgot to say that. Yeah. So I am born in Jersey, from Georgia, raised in Georgia. So I consider myself a grit, a girl raised in the South, a Georgia peach. um, but after college, went to college in Georgia. Then I went to med school at the Howard University College of Medicine, one of the founding chapters of SNMA. So yeah, and then I went on to fellowship. I did my combined residency at East Carolina University in EM and IM. And then I went on to simulation fellowship, and then I came and became an attending. I worked as an attending, including in my sim fellowship, for about 8 years before I decided to transition out of clinical work.
So you're one of those super duper smart people that
Glutton for punishment.
yes. But okay, so what I find interesting, how did you come to the EM and IM thing? Because I feel like with anybody that's in medicine, they know that that is two completely different personalities.
Yeah.
EM
I will say this though. I never had an interest in doing outpatient medicine. I never had that interest. It all started for, I don't know how I knew I wanted to be a ER doctor. It just kind of knew. Like I was in the EM interest group as like a first year med student. I became the president of the EM interest, or vice president of the EM interest group later on in med school. But when I did my third year rotation in medicine, I think it was like my very first rotation, third year, if I remember correctly. And I just loved it. I love the inpatient aspect of it. Never been a clinic person, even though I loved my primary patients in residency and they loved me. But I always like sick people. So I think in that way it is similar to EM because it's sick people. I like the idea of admitting people, stabilizing them, helping to continue to stabilize them after the ER starts that process, and then get them discharged. But I never was really that interested in outpatient, so that really spoke to me whenever I was on my third year rotation in med school. And at that time, I don't know exactly who it was, but someone shared with me that there were combined residencies at the end of my like third year, when it was already almost time for me to, I think I probably already started applying to residency. And then, I made a quick switch and was like, okay, I'm going to apply to both. So I applied to EM and EMIM. I never applied to IM.
Okay. So talk to me about the simulation space, because I actually really got interested in that while I was in residency. I decided to not do a fellowship at all. But talk to me about how you got into simulation, because
I feel like oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I just feel like it's really, really new. And so for people that are not in the emergency medicine space, they don't understand that there's a whole like fellowship that is around that. What simulation? Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think I'm a natural educator. That's one of my blessings. Over the years, I've learned to be introspective and figure out like what my natural gifts are. And I think that is one of my natural gifts. I like educating people. And I guess that manifested in residency as me always volunteering to help out teach, because I was in residency forever, um, teach the junior residents when they needed more help in the sim lab and things like that. So I was kind of just end up being there all the time. And the sim director and the sim educator in the sim lab at that time, they're the ones who let me know there was a fellowship. It didn't even cross my mind to apply at the fellowship. I was like, I'm going to work in a hospital somewhere seeing patients in the ER. I did know though that I really would love the idea of working at an academic center, but I never was a research type person. It was never for me. I never was interested in it and I didn't feel pressed to do it. So obviously I did like my scholarly projects and things that I needed to do to finish residency. But I always knew in the back of my mind, since I never was huge on research, that it would be harder, tougher for me to get a job at an academic center. So it kind of killed two birds with one stone. One, it was something I already did and loved to do. I literally was always there teaching and educating and was just great at SIM, and even created like created myself like a mini fellowship there as a resident, and just like did a whole rotation that I created myself because I just loved it so much. And so after that, once I found out there was a fellowship, I just started cold calling places. Like it was literally past time to apply, but that's just how aggressive I am. So I just started cold calling places and like, hey, you need me as your fellow. And I got into fellowship. And so after that,
Nope, stop right there. That is actually huge. I didn't know you did that. Funny enough, I did the exact same thing or something very, very similar. So, real quick story. I went to Ross, which is a Caribbean medical school. Anyone knows, I think, in the medical space that coming into emergency medicine, coming into emergency medicine from going to a Caribbean school can be really, really difficult. If you don't know that, just because it's a lot of stigma attached to you going to a Caribbean and then coming back and then all of the things associated with that. So when I was applying for residency, I did the same thing. I cold called my program that I'm like went to here in Memphis because I heard it was opening and I knew that I needed to pull from somewhere. So I cold called like the hustle, like the grind that I see that you have, like that is really, really,
listen,
really.
the worst thing anybody could tell you is no. That's how I looked at it. And I went through times subsequent to that where I kind of lost that fervor, but I have that same type of fervor now. Like I just pulled on those, like, whenever you have like times where you're doubting yourself, you think back over the years, like, oh, wait a minute. Because for me, med school, I didn't get into med school. I was on the waiting list. I got called by Howard 12 days before school started.
Wow. Okay, so pause. Let's back up and tell that. Actually, yeah. I want to put a pin in that on how you got into medical school.
Girl, don't get me started because I'll be preaching to your audience today, honey, because I got a mini story. I am blessed, honey. I have the favor of the Lord all over me.
Amen. Hallelujah. But you said you lost your fervor at one point, that same like drive that you were having to like do those cold calls and like get yourself there. Feel like you lost.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily any particular period of time. It's just that I realize now, as someone who is starting like a newer or has started a new endeavor of being a mentor, and then when I started my real estate consulting business, we'll get more into that. It was new for me, and so you find yourself having a lot of self-doubt, and especially also during the times like when I first made it to my academic institution, like I was working with like champions like in emergency medicine. So, there's always ups and downs and lulls where you may get into a lull where you're feeling like, doubting yourself, or when you're trying to start something new, like when I went into my directorship, times like that where you may feel like, do I have what it takes? But then you think back. For me, the tool that I use in those situations is what I was just saying. I think back over, my life and, like, man, this is where I'm supposed to be right now. I would not have got called 12 days before school started all those years ago, back in '06, if I wasn't supposed to be here now. So that's the tool that I use. So I was just bringing that up. But yeah, I didn't get into med school. So having that same thought process at that time where I was like, I'm behind the 8 ball. I just found about this fellowship thing and I wasn't prepared for it. Again, think back over those old times. Well, what was I doing back then? Back then I was in a summer research program, a summer enrichment program, preparing to take my MCAT again when they called me. I literally was about to pay to take the MCAT again when they called me from Howard and said, do you want to be in the entering class of 2006? And so same fervor, cold called, years later, cold called those places. And it's so funny because one of the places I cold called, they were like, oh my God, it's so funny that you called because we literally were considering having a second fellow this year. This is not something we've ever done before, but we literally were considering that. We already have a fellow, so we weren't too pressed about it. But hey, come for an interview. So went for an interview, and I got accepted into the program. Showed up there, months later, and that was in New York City. And I showed up and to orientation. There's no one there with me. I found out that the person who was the fellow that they accepted decided to leave at that time and do whatever they planned on doing with their life. They decided that they didn't want to be a fellow. So yeah.
Let me pause you right there because I want to shout right now. what God has for you,
Come on.
your name on it, is nobody else's name on it. It can look like you're not supposed to have it. It's not your time. It's not your place. And God was like, here you go. Let me special deliver this opportunity right to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. And all I had to do was take a chance and do something that other people may feel uncomfortable doing, just cold calling people. But I was like, what's the worst thing they can say is, no.
Or not respond. Ooh.
I told you, girl, don't get me started.
Here.
Because I it's clear to me the favor that I have over my life. It is clear to me. This is I give all glory to God.
That is a blessing. Wow, that gave me chills. So, okay, so now you're in fellowship. I'm assuming fellowship went fine. You said fellowship is just a year, correct?
Yeah, just a year.
Okay, and so now you are out and you're practicing and
Yeah. And so to go back and to answer further your question, with the sim fellowship at that time, it was just perfect timing for me. Again, God's favor, because that was around the time the ACGME had said that simulation education has to be a part of residency education, particularly in emergency medicine. So I was literally able to go where I wanted to go after that. And before, just 1 year or so prior, I was like, oh, I would love to work in academics, but I don't have an academic, type of CV that they would be looking for. I had several things on there, but not what, a top academic program may consider, at the top of their list. But because I cold called, did that 1 year fellowship and excelled, here I am.
I love that. I completely love that. So, when did you make the transition then to what you're doing now?
So yeah, it kind of just happened slowly over time. So what I'm doing now is building my clientele for my mentorship. My focus is Black women professionals, similar to me. I understand people like us, women, not even just high income earners, but especially high income earners, wearing the golden handcuffs. We're living comfortable in our lives, but I understand probably my first year, it was my first year as an attending, it just hit me that I was an employee. What happened is I worked for a state funded institution, my academic center that I worked at, and so we had to fill out timesheets. I'm so messy. I was like, timesheet? I got to fill out a timesheet. I've been going to school since I was 5 years old. I've been going to school for 31 years. I mean, well, 20 something years until I was 31 years old, and you telling me after all this, I got to fill out a timesheet to account for my time and spend all these hundreds of thousands of dollars for school and miss all these weddings, funerals, time for myself, time for my family, and I got to fill out a timesheet.
And to clock in and clock out.
And it just hit me at that time like a ton of bricks that I was an employee. And I vowed then that I was going to learn how to gain some freedom for myself so that I could do what I was doing because I wanted to, not because I had to. And so that's what made me, go harder in real estate. But I actually was already a landlord before my first year as a resident in my residency. I bought a home at the end of that year. I stayed there for the full academic year, learned the area, and then I bought my first home. I lived
Okay,
in that.
let me pause you right there.
Mhm.
So, let me, I guess, share with you how I looked at real estate when I was in residency, and
Okay.
it helped me with maybe where my mindset was. I was
Mhm.
always very afraid to purchase and register.
Mm.
I was always told, don't purchase anything because you're going to be gone in a few years and worrying about the burden of that. And so I also felt like coming from the background that I came from, like I'm from a single parent family. Like my
Mhm.
mom didn't have a ton of money to give me to do,
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm.
So I was very much on my own and scraped my way to even moving to residency, to Memphis to even come to residency. So how did you even get to, I guess, the mindset, or is
Mhm.
that something that you grew up around, like knowing,
Yeah, that's a
hey,
good question.
I can
Um,
do.
I think it was a little multifactorial. One, I will say I was a little bit different because again, I was in a long residency. So I told myself, because I'm not just only going to be here for 3 years, to me, the little bit I did know about finances, it just to me didn't, for some reason internally it didn't seem right to rent for 5 full years. So that was one thing. But I will say, similar to you, I did not grow up in a nuclear family, which is why I think it's so important to me now. I was raised by my great grandmother, but I'm a different bird and she was a different bird, and I think I got that from her. Like, although I think if I remember correctly, just from the talks with my family members and her when I was a kid, I think she had a maximum of an eighth grade education, formally, before she went on and became like a nursing assistant. But she always did things that were different than the status quo for women of her age, of her time in the small town that I grew up in Georgia. She was like the first house. Her husband died at a young age from a heart attack, but she continued to take care of 8 children. She was the first person to have indoor plumbing on the block. The way she found her house, she just literally went in to a military barracks. Or I think her husband was a veteran. Went to the military barracks. And was like, how? Looks like you guys are not using these, buildings. How can I? Buy this home from you or buy this property for you. And she made that her home. Like, she just was a go-getter type person. And although she never went to college or anything like that, she always pushed me. And so I think I was a little bit more of a different bird based off just her energy and the things that she instilled in me as hard work. So I will say that with her, and my family, they were homeowners, from the time that, like, well, she was a homeowner my whole life, but the rest of my family that helped to raise me, along with her as she got older and got Alzheimer's, they became homeowners as I went through, like, college. They, built their own homes and things like that. So we kind of like were growing together. It wasn't something like when I came into this world, like my, great grandmother and all my aunts and stuff that helped to raise me. They were business owners or things like that. So they couldn't show me that side. But as I went through middle school, high school, things like that, they went from, being like a teacher's aide or a nursing assistant all the way up to, being a teacher, then a vice principal. Like, so they were growing as I was growing. And so I kind of watched that. So I think that had instilled something in me just to go a little extra, as a resident than maybe the people around me. I hope that makes sense. A long way to answer a short question.
You know what? It answered it perfectly though, because I think we have so much in common, and you and I have never really not talked like this before.
Yeah. So I'm so glad you invited me to talk like this. Thank you.
I am too, but it just reminds me there's so many parallels I think that you and I have, like your great grandmother, of what I found out about my grandfather, who passed away before I was born, only a couple of years though, but from what my mom has shared, um, only had a seventh or eighth grade education, moved from Crossett, Arkansas to Milwaukee, met my grandmother, had a family, started businesses, uh,
Mm.
owned properties, and taught other
Yes.
people to do that as well
Oh,
too.
wow.
So to kind of see the parallels kind of like in our
Mhm.
generation, like
Mhm.
what has, even sometimes whether it's not, intentionally, this is
Mhm.
what you do and this is what you
Right.
blah blah. It's just seeing the example and knowing that that example is in our bloodline is also super reassuring too, that maybe if I had tapped into that, like, you know what, my grandmother figured it out, my great grandmother figured it out,
Yes.
granddaddy figured it, I can figure it out too. And I
Yes.
love
I
that
like
about
that. I like that. I really do, Kim, because I think I have that. I think that's a good way to sum it up. I definitely am a figure it out type person. I have a figure it out type energy about myself. Yeah.
and I think you have to in emergency medicine, you have to in entrepreneurship, and you damn sure do it in real estate,
Yeah.
because well, that's your specialty, is creative, all
Yep.
things creative in real estate. So let you take the road. Can you share with us like more about capital?
So that, I think we had left off talking about, yeah, my personal home, my first home, like everything I've done, like when I started doing it in real estate, I started creatively, which is so odd. So I kind of fell into it, but then like I remembered it. And so later on, when I became intentional about doing more real estate, then I intentionally did it creatively. So when I bought that first home, at that time, I didn't have that great credit. So a lot of people may know about doctor's loans. With doctor's loans, I think you have to, and I'm not sure exactly now, but I think at that time too, it probably was similar. You probably had to have around a 680. I think I was just underneath that. So I just did not qualify. But let me tell you, I get creative. I did my Googles, and I found out that there was a program where if you were buying outside of the city limits, like it had to be like a rural area. So technically it didn't advertise it as you have to be outside the city limits. It said you had to be in a rural area. But I realized if I got just outside of the city limits, that I still would qualify for this loan. And it was a 0 down payment loan. I had a realtor, but every time I've ever had a realtor, and no knock to the realtors I had because they were great. But again, I'm the type of person, I'm going to figure it out. So I'm searching along with them as well, especially now, whenever we have like, Zillow and Redfin and stuff like that. But even back then, whatever the search engine was, or just driving around, I was doing searching with her. And so I said, hey, I think this area, they have these new bills. And she was like, yeah, this particular new bill here may work out for you. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a 2-car garage. It was in like a little community that had a pool. And I guess whatever the builder was asking for it was a little higher for the other people in that area. They probably had a little bit better sense than me, but I was only there for less than a year. But it sat on the market for about a year. And so by that time, it wasn't really a seller's market, at least not for what the builder wanted. So we were able to talk him down just a tad bit. It was more so that he was able to, we were able to get seller's concessions. So he paid for a lot of the closing costs. And then also, when you purchase a property, you have to pay earnest money. So I paid my $500 in earnest money to get under contract. And I was thinking to myself, okay, I'm an intern. I see this property is new. I love it. It has most of the appliances. It didn't have a refrigerator.
Can I
I,
pause one
Mhm,
second? You said a couple of things. You said you needed earnest money
mhm,
and you
mhm.
needed, and you got the seller to make some concessions. Can you explain what those two
Yeah.
things?
Yeah. So earnest money, you have to, in order for this contract to be legal, whenever you're doing a purchase and sale agreement, you have to, prove or show that you're doing this contract in earnest, that you earnestly plan for it to go into fruition and actually close and settle. And the formal way to do that is to pay earnest money. A lot of people now, they have you paying thousands of dollars, but technically, I mean, you could literally put $1 down and it'd be earnest money. But for that contract, it was $500 we agreed upon. And then seller's concessions, it's just different things that a seller can concede to in order to make the deal go through. So they can, help you with closing costs, is a common thing. The other thing too is I didn't have money for a fridge. I was like, I'm an intern. I mean, I'm making, money for the first time in life, but I don't make that much money. So I asked the realtor and she was like, don't worry about it, we can ask for it. I said, I love it because the worst thing somebody can tell me is no. So we amended it. She came back to me and she was like, he said he'll do it. So we amended the contract. He put the fridge in there. The closing costs were covered. I literally bought my first property with only $500
Wow.
because I did my Googles and found a special loan, 0% down. I asked for help, seller's help, and I asked for my appliance. So yeah, and a brand new home that had only been built a year ago.
Wow.
And
That's
that was
un-
my personal home.
and
And then
this
when I went off to fellowship, I rented it out. And that's how I became a landlord accidentally.
and this is what city?
So this was in North Carolina. I went to residency in North Carolina, East Carolina University. And then when I went off to fellowship in New York, again, all those years later, it really wasn't a seller's market. My plan, I had no plan to be a real estate investor or a landlord. My plan was to peace out, move on up to New York and do my fellowship and live my best life. But I don't take any losses. And I found out that I would have to come to the closing table with money with the way the market was. And I said, ooh, I guess I will be renting a property then. I guess I'll be a landlord. And so that was the rest is history. It just worked out well for me. I was blessed to have a great property manager who's like family. That was the beginning of me having years of experience with being a landlord. And then when I finally became an attending, when I was just being messy that day, like, what? A timesheet? What? I have to fill out a timesheet? Oh no, 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 no. I need to figure out some ways that I can make some money and build some assets for myself so that I don't have to do this forever. And I just knew, like, even at orientation, even before I realized the timesheet issue at orientation, they were telling you about the different retirement plans. Like you can do 401k, 403b. You can, you're going to be an assistant professor. I was in clinical instruction at that time, but you're working at academic institutions. So you're technically an educator. So you could do a tenure track. And I was like, okay, tell me more about tenure track. They were like, it's 20 years. I said, oh, give me the other track. I ain't gonna be here for 20 years. I just knew that that was not for me from the
Yeah.
beginning.
Yes. That's amazing. So I guess the big takeaway that I've got is just like ask for help. Like even you renting out your first home when you went to fellowship, you knew that you could not manage that property from New York all the way in North Carolina. So you asked for help. So how did you find that property manager?
I was blessed. I was blessed. One of my good friends there, her husband, his family had a property management company. And he was like, yeah, your home was new when you bought it and you took amazing care of it. This will be like one of my easiest properties of my portfolio of properties that I manage. So again, it's just the glory to God. It's the favor of the Lord. So I didn't have to look really far in that aspect. Now, obviously, whenever I actually became an investor in Earnest, it takes a little bit more work to find members of your team. But in that instance, it just fell into place for me. And I just, I always pray for help. Now I do it more intentionally. My prayer is often, and this time I actually got this from Lovey Ajayi. I don't know if you follow her. But she made a post on Instagram one time talking about how she asked for help and she prays like, Lord, help my helpers find me. And so that's been my prayer. Help my helpers find me. That wasn't my discreet prayer back then, but I knew that I had to pivot my plan of selling the property. And I just said, Lord, help me, and that, my family friend, basically my family came in and became a property manager. And I learned a lot from him too about, making sure we keep reserves and things like that. Like, a lot I learned from that process. And then once I was like, hey, years later or a year later after fellowship, when I came to my big girl job and I realized that I was an employee after all these years, just like I'm thinking I'm exhaling, like, oh, I finally here. It's my attending big girl job. Wait a minute, you hit you like a ton of bricks. You're an employee. And so I became an earnest looking for different assets. And I would go around to the different professional circles in the area. There would be different events, social events, sometimes educational events. And I just came across people talking about real estate. And so I decided to invest in myself and I paid thousands of dollars to take a course to learn how to invest, especially in my area, which I have now. Not then, but now all of my investments are in Baltimore, well, except for some land in Georgia.
Wow. So briefly, could you share what your portfolio looks like now?
Yeah. So right now I've purchased several properties. I've sold some, but right now still hold 8 properties of my own or 8 doors of my own. And then I have partial ownership and like small syndication, like just a small group investment. Because I know I'm using technical terms, like a small group investment of a larger residential property. And then I have partial ownership in a larger syndication, which is a group investment of commercial and residential properties here in Baltimore. So I have singles, a couple duplexes now. I bought and sold several properties. I've sold a couple, but now I still have 8 units and that I own by myself, as well as some land in Georgia. But then what I own with other people are a larger syndication and then a smaller like group investment of a residential property that we're actually probably about to close on a sale. So I'll get that return on my investment soon.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Okay, so I guess how does your real estate investment and your mentorship and your education now impact what you do clinically? Is that Do you still work clinically? Are you doing the real estate full time? What are things
Yeah,
kind of
no,
like?
I haven't worked clinically, and it's still fresh because it's just been a month. And when I left, my plan was not to work clinically. My plan was to completely transition out of clinical medicine, but I also planned to take some time after I resigned because I gave a significant notice because again, I was simulation director, so I had to give enough notice. And our contract says we have to give notice, but I also wanted to, you don't want to burn bridges or anything, and I never had an issue with my employer. So give them notice, and it would give me time to find a non-clinical remote work job. That was my plan, completely non-clinical remote, so that if I want to be remote in Puerto Rico, I could be there working. And so my plan was like the first month just to chill and just be happy that I took the chance and just, actually pulled the trigger and resigned. And then the following months that I had left before my last day, my plan was to now like take the time to change my academics CV, my teaching portfolio, this long portfolio into an actual like corporate resume. But I had so many unexpected losses and trauma in my life during that time that just did not happen. And so now I'm just going where the Holy Spirit leads me because it seems that it is leading me to focus on my business, which in previous years, for the past, like in 2020, the end of 2020, like late summer, early fall, I started doing consulting. Real estate consulting. And I kind of, again, fell into that accidentally because people just kept wanting to pick my brain. Especially like with creative financing, seller financing subject to, but just getting started, different things. And I wanted to help, and I did help so many people for free. But I also had a job, which was two jobs in one, as an academic physician, a program director for a fellowship, as well as the simulation director for that part of the academics for the department. So like three jobs in one. So I had to start charging. So again, fell into the consulting business. But my plan, again, when I left my job was to also leave that consulting behind because I realized I would make a better impact of doing a longitudinal mentorship. And so that's what I've launched in this new year,
I love that.
as opposed to kind of that disjointed, like hour call here, hour call there. People circle back around to me like, "Oh yeah, you helped me, but this is where I am now." I'm like, "Wait a minute, remind me where we left off at." So I just wanted something more longitudinal.
Yes. Oh my God. You girl, queen, just real
Oh,
estate queen. I love that. So let me ask you, I guess, one last question because I think I got all of my questions answered. You shared so much. But what would be your best advice to maybe a medical student interested in real estate or a resident that maybe came from a background like you and I, like, I don't really have that much money. I don't really know what's
mhm,
going on.
mhm,
Or
mhm.
even someone that's an attending that is interested in getting into the real estate bubble. What is your best advice for
I
them
think not
forward?
even for a resident, maybe not a medical student, but even like a college student, especially if they worked, but maybe not a medical student because you just kind of cannot work in medical school. But even for a resident, when your income seems a little bit low, I think I would say get educated and get started. That's always my advice to people. Educate yourself, figure out the type of personality you have because there's different types of investment strategies. There's active investing, there's passive investing. Like I mentioned, I have a syndication, which is invest in a couple syndications, which is more of a passive thing, but I'm an active investor by heart. I like to be in the mix. But I know that about my personality. So get educated on the different types of investing so you can figure out which is the best strategy for you. Um, and part of that education is introspective education about yourself. What are my short-term goals? What are my long-term goals? For me, when I became intentional about investing, when I wasn't like focused on that accidental landlord, I was like, I'm intentionally going to invest because this timesheet situation has shook me to my core. I said my plan was to slowly replace my income over the years until I could work because I wanted to, not because I had to, because I have was slowly replacing my earned income with passive, well, less active income from real estate. So that was my goal. Someone else's goal may not be to replace their income. They may not want to stop working ever. They may love what they do, which I did too, and it may actually not be causing stress on them like it did me. So they may want to just invest for the long term. Like they just want to have assets to pass to the kids. They don't care about it affecting their income. So again, figure out what you want, what type of investor you think you will be, and then find mentorship. So get educated, get started. So all that analysis paralysis, throw that out the window. Imperfect action is better than no action. So
Pause.
you just
Pause
Sorry.
right there. Say that one more time.
Imperfect action is better than no action.
We have been told for so many years that we have to get the answer right. We have to get the diagnosis, that we have to do this, or the patient's going to die, or they're going to have some terrible outcome. The rest of the world is not like that. As long as you make intentional action, be it small as it may, maybe it's just reading a couple of pages of White Coat Investor. Maybe it's scrolling down MSNBC and seeing what the stock portfolio looks like today. Just perfect action moves the needle more so than anything. That is something that I, as an attending, that has blown my mind.
Right.
I love it.
Right. And I think that your action should be actually, getting some type of guidance, whether you have to take a course or get some books. And I'm not just saying that because I have a mentorship. You're going to pay. Like people want to save money. And so that's why I was saying, even as a college student, especially if you have a job, even as a resident, even if you're not making a lot of money now, again, probably not med students, you think you're saving money by not investing in something, but I'm telling you, spending a couple hundred to a couple thousands of dollars, depending on what program or whatever you're using to learn from, will save you time in the long run, because it will save you money, and more importantly, it's going to save you time, because you are going to make mistakes in real estate investing. Now, either you're going to make small mistakes, or you're going to make big mistakes. The big mistakes cost big bucks. You trying to avoid spending money on education, it's gonna make you lose so much and make a lot of costly mistakes and potentially legal mistakes. So you really need to go ahead and just invest in yourself. Take a course, do some books. There's a lot of free information out there. I have a group with all I do is give free information, and I did it for since 2020. But then I also, have paid information, which for me, you need that intensity as well when you're really ready to take action. So either you're going to pay in small mistakes, or pay, in big mistakes, I should say, or you're going to pay by getting properly educated.
I keep saying this is going to be the last question, but
keep going, girl.
It will be. Do you have maybe the top 3 resources that someone could check out that you felt like helped you on your journey? Everyone talks about White Coat Investor, of course, reading the book and reading the blog, getting subscribed to them. Kevin MD, honestly, that has some information on there, but are there some other things that you've read that you've heard of?
When I got started, like I said, I took a course, but of course, like I said, I also did a lot of free resources in addition to what I paid for. And at that time, I think Bigger Pockets was big. Now, I'm going to be unapologetic here. I'm really big on Black resources. I'm just like all Black, everything. That's me. That's just who I am. So I always try to seek out whatever information I'm trying to learn, try to seek out someone who is Black that I can patronize and invest in them so they can teach me. So subsequently to looking at some of those free resources from Bigger Pockets, I started doing a lot of podcast listening. The Millionaire podcast by Charles Oglesby was big for me back then. They still do several episodes, I think almost weekly. They're not all about real estate now.
Okay.
But early on, they were about real estate mostly. So again, you can go back and listen to some of those old episodes. I'm a big fan of Earn Your Leisure. I'm actually an earner. I invested into their educational platform, which is amazing. They have so many, it's like overwhelming how many resources they have on their educational platform. And I think right now they're having a sale or something. And again, they don't pay me no money. I'm just like, it literally is just that good. But even their free resources, like their podcasts, and then their affiliate, which is also, I think, one of their partners, MG, the mortgage guy, has a real estate podcast called Rants and Gems, which is really good. Then there's like Black Real Estate Dialogue, which is another podcast. Again, this is all free resources. And then there's so many different YouTubers as well. You just search for whatever you're looking for on YouTube. And of course, if you are a Black female physician, dentist, pharmacist, then, my group is a free resource.
Tell us more about your group. Tell us about your group.
Yeah. So I, again, accidentally just following the spirit and the spirit lead me. I was in a larger group for Black female physicians. And I think one day someone posted, is there like a spinoff group where we just talk about real estate? And no one really answered. And it's so funny because the days leading up to that, I had been thinking about starting a group. And it's so crazy that question came up, and I just waited. Like I literally turned on the notifications for that post so I could see when people were going to respond so I could join it. But no, there was not one. So I created it like literally probably that same day or that same week. So it's a Facebook community, Sister Docs and REI. And it's, like I said, Black female doctors, dentists, pharmacists have joined. It's over 600 members. And either they're investors or want to learn how to become real estate investors.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Oh, and I'm in that group.
Within that group, I do like a podcast within that group of sorts. It's a video interview series called REI Rounds, where I interview different sister docs and let them tell their story. Because for me, that's been the best way that I have learned, other than taking an actual mentorship course. I learned by hearing people's stories.
I love that. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. And I'm in the 60 Docs of REI group. It's been great. You interviewed me about my business.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. Do you know how hard it is, girl, to get people to share their story? I don't know why people are so shy, especially as a private group too. Like I don't publicize it because I do know that there are some people in that group who have a whole public persona and they have a brand around their real estate. And then there's a lot of people, they may not even want their coworkers or people around them to know they're investing. So I respect that. So I keep everything in there private.
Right. Well, I felt comfortable because I knew it was a, private community, and, we were all of like mind. So I
We're
didn't
there
really
to support each other.
Yeah, we're just here to support. And so that's been a great community. So thank you for creating that space.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to share before we go? Of course, that we need all of your social handles. How can someone find you?
I will just say, in addition to, get educating and get started, just understand, really kind of double clicking on what we both talked about earlier about the taking action and the imperfect action. There is an opportunity cost to waiting. There is an opportunity cost to waiting. Taking no action is action. Okay. So not making a decision is making a decision. If you want to be a small business owner, if you want to be a franchise owner, if you want to be an investor, and again, this is not just talking about real estate, but just whatever you want to be outside of your, earned income, 9 to 5, W-2 job or whatever. If you want to do that thing and you're like, okay, I'm just going to wait till, this part of my life, or to, this part of the year, there's an opportunity cost, particularly if we're talking about asset building. When you purchase an asset, if you purchase it correctly, if you have proper guidance like me, you're going to start making money from that day. If you wait to next year, you don't start compounding that interest. If it's like stocks or things like that, you don't start until a year later or whenever that time is. And a lot of the conversations that people will be hearing us talk on this episode and they will be thinking, oh yeah, I'm really going to do that. I'm inspired. I'm going to get started. I'm going to wait till, after this person's birthday or whatever it is in their life. Stop right now and think about when the last time you probably had that same conversation. You probably said that 2 years ago. You might have said it 5 years ago. I'm just saying. So think about the opportunity costs, okay? But yeah, follow me, you guys. I just politely dragged you a little bit. I love y'all. Just a little polite dragging, but follow me. So yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you, Daa'iyah. I super appreciate your time, your generosity. Capital Dynasty is going nowhere but to the moon and beyond. Yes. I am glad to know you and to see what you're doing. And then also, like I said, just showing other people, like, I'm just amazed that you took a very you were in academia, which we all know is the ivory tower. And that is the prestige, and that is the je ne sais quoi that everybody is trying to get to in medicine. And the fact that you got there, enjoyed it, I'm assuming.
And left on a high note.
No, and now you're doing something else. I think it shows that from so many different angles, like, we are told, like, oh, make a decision. Like, what are you going to practice? What do you want to be? What do you want to be? What do you even be? And for real life, like, our life takes us on so many different journeys and twists and turns and angles. I never would have thought that, I would say now that I'm an entrepreneur, like, in a position and all of these other things, because just life will take you so many different ways. Yeah. See that there's other physicians that have checked all the boxes that academia and medicine is telling you to check. And then now you're doing something even more incredible, creating your own world, creating your own field, outside of the hospital is, like, so incredible. So I'd love to see it.
You're absolutely right. I know we're supposed to end, but I have to double click on that because you're preaching. That we were so focused in medicine, we didn't even have time to think about if there were other passions or, things like to become successful, especially in emergency medicine. It's not like, the most competitive, or like, it's just not completely unheard of for Black women to be in it, but it definitely is not just full of just Black women. And, so just the focus that it takes to get there, it's almost, you can't even consider something else. It wasn't until I made it to attendinghood and I was like, oh, that I could look around and be like, wait a minute, this is not right. Like, something, I need to be focusing on something else. And so many people will question me in the last month and in the months leading up to my departure, after I, put my resignation in. What you're going to do? You went to all this school not to be a doctor. You're not going to feel like a doctor if you're not seeing patients. And some of their comments or questions, I know was just more so a reflection of, like, their mindset and their fear. But I will say this. Things are in your life for a reason and a season. I was blessed to, for over a decade, from residency and everything, to take care of people in emergency rooms. It was one of my life's greatest joys. I literally have saved people's lives that I can't even count. I have helped to educate future physicians and loved it. That has been my greatest joy, especially the education. But the way that I'm going to change Black women's lives by teaching them how to create assets and freedom for themselves is also another vocation and calling in life. So I don't take it lightly. Like, literally, this is life or death for me. That's why I had to do a nice little dragging earlier, because it's not something I don't have to, like, do this mentorship or teach or educate people. I literally can go and make money just with the education that I have, like a significant amount of money. But literally, I have a passion for this because it's going to change lives. And once I have a group of people that I help go from beginner to intermediate, or intermediate to scale up to advance, we're all going to invest together, and the things that we're going to do as a group, it's going to be life changing.
Oh, I can't wait. Girl, call me. Don't forget me. Don't forget me.
I won't forget you, girl.
All right. Well,
But
Daa'iyah,
yeah, follow me, ladies, Capital Dynasty, or gents as well, at Capital Dynasty on Instagram. That is my business page. I am on LinkedIn. I don't really know how to work LinkedIn very well, but you can message me there if you want to. And again, like I said, if you fall into the category that I mentioned earlier from my Facebook group, you can find me on there. But otherwise, I don't spend too much time on Facebook other than, my community, my tribe there.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure that all of your information is in the show notes. So anyone that wants to connect with you or tap into any of the resources that we talked about today has that information. Daa'iyah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Fire. You have dropped so many gems. This was incredible.
Yes, girl. We have to do it again because I didn't even tell y'all about seller financing, girl. Subject to, we got to do it all again. Got to do another episode.
We'll bring you back and some more strategies and tips that you can teach us. Absolutely. I love that. All right. We'll talk later.
All righty.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Docs Get Money podcast. New episodes drop every Thursday wherever you find your favorite podcast. Share, comment, follow, and subscribe to the Docs Get Money podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to know more, visit me, Dr. Kimberly Brown, at KimberlyBrownMD.com, and be sure to follow me at Dr. Kimberly B on Instagram. And until next time, let's go get this money, honey.